Good afternoon everyone, and welcome to this council meeting of the 19th of September 2022, which is being held in the council chambers at the Civic Centre and is also being live streamed. We're delighted to be back in person and to have the chamber open to the public as well. I'm Lydia Wilson, Chair of Council, and I'd also like to introduce you to my administrator colleagues. Firstly, Ms Peter Duncan.
Morning, everybody. Morning, good afternoon. I don't know where I am. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you. And Mr Chris Eddy.
I'll go good evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. And I'd also like to introduce our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Craig Lloyd, and ask that he in turn introduce other council officers in attendance.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'd like to introduce our Director of Planning and Development, Mr Justin O'Mara, Director of Customer and Corporate Services, Ms Sarah Renner, Acting Director of Infrastructure and Environment, Ms Amanda Dodd, Acting Director of Community Wellbeing, Ms Lenshay Markowska, Executive Manager Governance and Strategy, Mr Frank Joyce, and our Executive Manager Public Affairs, Ms Janine Morgan. Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon this council to make informed and good decisions to benefit the people of the city of Whittlesea. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. But lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Thank you. Just like to mention the reason for bringing this council meeting forward. Obviously it was scheduled for a later meeting, but we're starting earlier. That change was to avoid a clash with the funeral of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And at that point I'll hand over to our Chair, Lydia Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lloyd. On behalf of the City of Whittlesea, I recognise the rich Aboriginal heritage of this country and acknowledge the Wurundjeri Willem clan as the traditional owners of this place. And I'd also like to pay my personal respect to elders past, present and emerging. We do have a few key acknowledgements this afternoon, and first and foremost, we must recognise the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. We mourn the loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and on behalf of our staff and community, we offer our deepest condolences to His Majesty King Charles III and to the royal family as well. The Queen was treasured by many around the world as the ruling monarch of the Commonwealth, a duty she upheld most diligently for some 70 years. She was a symbol of strength and stability, and we pay tribute to the immense contribution she made through a lifetime of service. May she rest in peace. A second acknowledgement we have this afternoon, and I'll hand over to Ms Duncan for that acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair. Ron Driscoll is an artist that we've arranged a selection of portraits here in the council chambers, and for those of you here this afternoon, you can see them up above the boards there. Ron's work originally appeared in an exhibition held in the Great Hall in 2020, and his portraits were greatly admired for the wonderful personality and the depth of character that were captured in his works. Following this response to Ron's works in 2020, Council commissioned a series of portraits to celebrate the diversity of Whittlesea residents and the really rich stories of their lives. The 24 portraits were displayed in the Great Hall in 2021 in the exhibition named Face to Face, Portraits of the Community. And it showed the faces and the stories of members of our community from different ages, cultural backgrounds, suburbs, occupations and interests. In the series there are several portraits of Aboriginal people, including 2 Wurundjeri elders, traditional owners of this land. There are also portraits of local traders, small business owners, youth, a Vietnam War veteran, other artists and an expert in local history and cultural heritage. There are mothers, young children, grandparents and 20-something-year-olds venturing off starting their working lives. There are healthcare workers, construction workers and retirees, and all have really rich and interesting life stories. These works are part of Council's visual art collection, a collection which contributes to the city's cultural identity and social history of our municipality. Exhibiting the portraits in the council chambers allows people to continue to enjoy all of the works and celebrate the diversity of our community. This also serves as an important reminder that anyone who enters the council chambers, that the work is done to the benefit of everybody in our community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms Duncan. And I do just need to highlight one particular portrait, which is the portrait right at the end on my right, which is the much-loved former CEO, David Turnbull, who passed away in 2020. So I think it's quite memorable that his portrait is in the chamber. Thank you, Ms Duncan. And Mr Eddy, you also have a further acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure to advise that the City of Whittlesea, along with our Northern Region partners, have been awarded an award at the Procurement Australia Awards for 2020 to 2022. They had the 15th annual conference and award ceremony recently. The work that was done on this policy was shared with Banyule, Darebin, Hume, Moreland, Mitchell and Nillumbik, our Northern Region partners. This collective work on a regional procurement policy represents the 5th award that the City of Whittlesea has won in 6 years, which is a pretty good record, Chair. I'd like to make special mention of Tom Masters, the former Unit Manager of Procurement, for his hard work on the project, and to acknowledge George Alabakov, the Unit Manager of Procurement, who attended the event and accepted the award on behalf of the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. That is quite exceptional achievement, and can I also echo your congratulations to our procurement staff as well. I note that all administrators are present. Administrators, if you have a conflict of interest in any item on the notice paper, you may verbally disclose the type and nature of the interest now, but you must make a declaration immediately before consideration of the matter in question. Are there any items for which you have a conflict of interest to declare? No. And I also have no conflict of interest to declare. I seek a motion to confirm the minutes of the following preceding meetings. The scheduled meeting of Council held on the 15th of August 2022 and the additional Council meeting held on the 5th of September 2022. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
Chair, I'm happy to move the minutes for both of those meetings.
Thank you, Administrator Eddy, and thank you, Administrator Duncan, for seconding. I'll now put the matter to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Now, we do actually have a number of questions this afternoon, and none of the people who have submitted questions have requested that they attend to present their own questions, which is regrettable. We always like to have people coming along to the council meeting to present their questions or petitions. So the first question is from Ms Miriam Cristallini, and she actually has 3 questions. Firstly, why are there currently no playground provisions for the completion of Watery Gully Park in the River Gum pocket of Mill Park? Second question, why does the park design not cater for the older children of the area from 12 to 21 years old? We previously had a flying fox, large slide, and what has been completed so far has given the park less amenities for the older children than previously. And third question, how are we able to provide park design suggestions? Mr Lloyd, I wonder whether you would please respond to that question.
Thank you, Chair. Council has more than 250 parks and playgrounds across the municipality, and each year we allocate funding for upgrades and renewal. Works are planned in consultation with the local community, taking into consideration the size and the scale of the park. In mid-2020, after consultation with the local community, Council upgraded the old playground equipment at Watery Gully Park and added new park assets such as a barbecue and shelter. I understand that you have recently detailed discussions with council officers in regards to additional equipment, and your suggestions have been noted and will be considered as part of the planning process for the 2023-24 Budget and Community Plan Action Plan.
Thank you, Mr Lloyd. The second question is from Mr Nick Brain, and I quote, "On occasion, Council has decided not to release critical financial information about its projects into the public domain. For projects such as the Mernda mega project, however, millions of ratepayer funds have been committed. How does Council propose to keep ratepayers informed about strategies it is employing to responsibly discharge its requirement to manage financial risk prudentially pursuant to Section 101(1)(b) of the Local Government Act 2020 and ensure critical financial information about council projects will not be kept secret?" And again, Mr Lloyd, I wonder if you could respond to Mr Brain's question.
Thank you, Chair. Council is committed to public transparency, good governance and responsible financial management. We report to the community every quarter on our revenue and expenditure through our council meetings and annually in our annual report. And we also report quarterly on our major capital projects. Our budget document, which is published on our website, also contains detailed financial information about all of our projects. Our community are invited each year to provide their input into the budget through extensive community consultation, and I note this year is no exception. In fact, we've broadened out our community consultation even further this year. Our council meetings are open to the public by default, and council only designates items as confidential at these meetings under very specific circumstances and in accordance with the Local Government Act, such as the awarding of contracts where the release of information publicly may prejudice our position in a commercial negotiation, or where commercially sensitive information is involved that would unreasonably expose a business to disadvantage or could provide a commercial advantage to a third party. For large projects, this would include things like tender amounts submitted by unsuccessful tenderers and the overall tender evaluation, details of credit and reference checks about the tenderers provided to Council in confidence. Council's commitment to public transparency is demonstrated by the percentage of Council resolutions which are made at meetings close to the public, which in the 2020-21 financial year was 4.35% of all reports considered by Council. This is very significantly lower than the average of similar councils, which sits at 8.37%, and I also add much lower than the figures at the final year of the previous council, which was some 13%. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Lloyd. And I omitted to say earlier that the responses to the questions will be sent to each person that has written to Council.
That's correct.
The third question this afternoon is from Mark Higgins of Donnybrook, and his question is, the walking and cycling plan does not seem to include Donnybrook Road for Woodstock and Donnybrook. The road on the other side of the Hume Freeway is much more developed for pedestrians and cycling than Donnybrook. This is understandable because it was developed first, but Donnybrook has the railway station and around 6 or 7 estates with thousands of residents already. My question is, when are we going to see a temporary walkway with concrete barriers to make it safe for pedestrians and cyclists to travel to the station? When are buses going to stop at every estate on a regular basis? I have nearly 200 signatures from residents in the area who see the issues along the road and how dangerous it is. I have been knocked off my bike along the road and I was lucky they were not travelling fast as many cars do. 40 kilometres per hour signage constantly exceeded. And again, Mr Lloyd, if you could respond to that question.
Thank you, Chair. Council recognises the importance of walking and cycling and the benefits this provides to our community, both from a health and wellbeing perspective and also from an environmental point of view. Our walking and cycling plan, which we presented at tonight's Council meeting for endorsement, sets out a range of actions that will help provide safer walking and cycling options and increase the levels of participation in active travel. It also sets out our key directions on managing the development and expansion of our municipality's walking and cycling network. Donnybrook is one of our municipality's fastest growing suburbs, and we're actively working with developers to ensure continuous walking and cycling paths are part of the development process wherever possible. Our walking and cycling plan also contains a list of identified priorities and actions to advocate for funding to deliver a range of projects. This includes advocating to the state government for the upgrade of Donnybrook Road, which is currently the responsibility of the Department of Transport, between Epping Road and Merry Creek, which will also include improving walking and cycling infrastructure along this stretch of road. In relation to the question on buses, public transport is the responsibility of the state government, and recommend that the question be directed there.
Thank you, Mr Lloyd. The fourth question this afternoon is from Kevin Bullam of Craigieburn, and his question is it the view of the Council that the strategic cycling corridor along the High Street/Mernda Rail Line corridor between Keon Parade and M80 Metropolitan Ring Road can be or should be constructed during the timeline of the delivery of the Keon Parade level crossing removal project by the Level Crossing Removal Authority? If construction of the bike riding infrastructure becomes council responsibility after the Keon Parade level crossing removal project, would the council seek to recover or receive any consideration or compensation should the level crossing removal project result in greater difficulties in building the bike riding infrastructure, e.g. if there is an increase in motor vehicle access ways to cross or other obstacles to avoid the safety and convenience of bike riders and other users? Again, Mr Lloyd, if I could ask you to respond to that question.
Thank you, Chair. Council is currently finalising the design of the shared path between Keon Park and Thomastown stations along High Street corridor. Council officers are working closely with the Level Crossing Removal Project team and VicTrack on the design of this key infrastructure. It is envisaged that the path will either be constructed as part of the Keon Park Level Crossing Removal Project or after the project is finished. City of Whittlesea officers are negotiating with the Level Crossing Removal Project and the State Government to incorporate the construction of the shared path into the Level Crossing Removal Project. Council will continue to work in partnership with these groups on the level crossing removal to deliver safe and well-connected infrastructure to support ongoing cycling participation for our residents.
Thank you, Mr Lloyd. Our final public question for this afternoon is from Evie Levens, Whittlesea resident and Animal Justice Party candidate for Thomastown. And it's quite a lengthy question, which I will read in full. It's my understanding that Epping Animal Welfare Facility will, from the 16th of October, when it shifts from RSPCA management to Whittlesea Council management on behalf of Whittlesea, Moreland and Darebin councils, cease to offer direct adoptions to the public and will instead only surrender unclaimed companion animals to rescue groups. Rescue groups simply do not have the capacity to save the more than 2,000 animals who go unclaimed every year in the Whittlesea, Moreland and Darebin local government areas. Furthermore, I understand the RSPCA has been ordered to empty the facility before handover on the 16th of October. Given there is no realistic way to rehome the hundreds of animals in the facility in 1 month, and rescue groups will not be able to meet demand for rehoming once the facility stops direct adoptions to the public, the Animal Justice Party and many community members hold serious concerns that animals currently in the facility and those who will end up there from the 16th of October onwards will be killed out of sheer convenience. My questions for the Council are: Question 1, can City of Whittlesea guarantee the proposed change in management won't increase the number of companion animals being killed at the Epping Welfare Facility, including animals currently in the facility? Question 2, the City of Whittlesea, acting on behalf of Moreland and Darebin councils, states on its website, If the owner is not found, rehoming of the animal will be sought through partnerships with various rescue groups and vet clinics. We have already entered into formal agreements with 26 rescue groups and welfare organisations, and we look forward to working with the sector. Council has engaged with and received a strong response from these stakeholders who are keen to support the Council's objectives. Can you confirm what organisations or individuals have been consulted and signed formal agreements? And do they have the capacity to rehome the more than 2,000 animals that the facility deals with in a given year? That is the end of the question. Mr Lloyd, if you could please respond again.
Thank you, Chair. Whittlesea, Moreland and Darebin councils have decided to manage the operation of the Epping Animal Welfare Facility in-house to achieve the best possible outcomes for the animals and our community. The three councils have worked together to develop an operating model which is designed to reduce the current euthanasia rates and reunite the maximum amount of animals with their owners or find them loving new homes. The facility will be managed and resourced by experts in animal care and welfare. There will be some adoptions directly from the facility, and to date we have partnered with 26 rescue groups and welfare organisations who share our vision for improving the outcomes for the animals in our care and ensure more pets find forever homes. We value the privacy of the arrangements we have in place with our partners, and part of that is honouring the confidentiality that is held within these agreements. We are aware of some misinformation circulating in the community, so I thank you for this question because it gives us the opportunity to provide the community with the correct information. Council has not ordered the RSPCA to empty the facility. As part of the transition arrangements, RSPCA Victoria has advised Council that they will remove animals who are past the 8-day quarantine period to other RSPCA shelters. Any animals still within the 8 days will remain at the Epping Animal Welfare Facility. Veterinary work will be undertaken at the facility. This will include, but is not limited to, vaccination, flea and worm treatments, microchipping and any other treatment that is required while animals are in our care. A committee will be established which will include staff from each council, the Epping Animal Welfare Facility Coordinator and the Epping Animal Welfare Facility Veterinarian. The committee will consider feedback from animal attendants and other relevant staff to determine which unclaimed animals are suitable for rehoming and which are not. The people on this committee have the expertise, experience and qualifications to ensure ethical decision-making. If at any time our rescue and welfare partners do not have the capacity to take animals, we will continue to care for them at the facility until there is capacity or until the animal has been adopted from our facility. We are very confident the arrangements we're putting in place will deliver enhanced outcomes for our animals in our care, and we are looking forward to working with the passionate people in with the rescue sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lloyd, for that very comprehensive response publicly. I think it's important to clarify Council's position. Thank you. We also have two petitions this afternoon. The first petition that's been received is from 146 signatories objecting to the planning permit application from Optus to erect a 4G, 5G and smart city wireless telecommunications tower at 54 Main Street, Thomastown. 11 signatures on this petition are valid signatures in accordance with the governance rules. Of the 135 remaining signatures that do not meet the requirements of the governance rules, 77 are residents of the municipality, 19 are non-residents of the municipality and 39 did not document their address. Administrators, do you have any questions in relation to that petition? Mr Eddy?
Thank you, Chair. Just looking for some clarification that a petition in relation to a live planning matter would normally be considered as a submission to that planning matter and not separately as a petition?
I think Mr Lloyd is going to respond to your question.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. Yes, they are treated as a submission. In fact, a petition is treated as a single submission.
Any further questions? I therefore call for a motion for the petition to be tabled.
Yes, Chair. I move to resolve that Council received the petition from 11 signatories objecting to the planning permit application from Optus to erect a 4G, 5G and Smart City wireless telecommunications tower at 54 Main Road, Thomastown, and consider the petition in conjunction with the Council report on planning application PLN-37256, which will be presented to Council at its meeting on Monday, the 21st of November 2022.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. And do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Chair.
Would the seconder like to speak? In that case, I'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Could I just double check whether anyone in the gallery is having any trouble hearing? No? You're okay? Okay, thank you. I just actually wondered whether, with Administrator Duncan, there might have been no reflection on you, Administrator Duncan, but people struggling to hear. The second petition this afternoon has been received from 99 signatories, 60 residents of the municipality and 39 non-residents, requesting Council increase parking availability and disability parking spaces for elderly citizens at VR Michael Reserve, Lalor. Again, administrators, do you have any questions in relation to this petition? And I have none. I'm happy to move the petition, and I move to resolve that Council note the petition from 99 signatories, 60 residents and 39 non-residents, requesting Council increase the amount of parking spaces and create more accessible parking for elderly citizens at VR Michael Reserve, Lalor, and write to the head petitioner to inform them that 1. A meeting with the head petitioner will be organised with the coordinators of leisure and recreation and open space planning. 2. A report to Council will be prepared for the December 2022 Council meeting, advising of the outcome of analysis, needs and issues, and provide a recommendation. And 3. The head petitioner will be advised of Council's decision following the Council meeting. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I wish not to speak to the motion. Administrator Duncan, do you wish to speak? So I'll now put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. That ends questions and petitions, so we'll now move into general business, and administrators will now work through the agenda, which is quite a lengthy agenda this afternoon. Item 5.1.1, Endorsement of Child Safe Policy, and if I could invite our Acting Director of Community Wellbeing, Ms Lenche Markowska, to come forward to speak to this item. Thank you, Ms Markowska.
Thank you, Chair. On 1st of July 2022, new Victorian child safe standards came into effect, requiring the City of Whittlesea to update its council child safe policy. Minor amendments are proposed to this policy to achieve compliance, and with me today is Gemma James, our child safe advisor, to talk to that.
Thank you. So, City of Whittlesea's child safe policy is being updated in line with the new child safe standards introduced by the Victorian Government in July 2022. Victoria's mandatory child safe standards have been in effect since 2016. In 2019, the Victorian Government undertook a review of the standards. Although the review found strong support for the standards, there were a number of recommended changes to better align the standards with the national principles for the child safe organisations. These recommendations were adopted, resulting in a change to the standards commencing on 1 July 2022. The changes reflect a move from the current 7 standards to 11 standards. Key changes include the following new requirements: involving families and communities in organisations' efforts to keep children and young people safe, a greater focus on safety for Aboriginal children and young people, managing the risk of child abuse in an online environment, and greater clarity on the governance, systems and processes to keep children and young people safe. There will be some unique features in these new standards. There will be a brand new standard which focuses on the cultural safety for Aboriginal children and young people, which was actually recommended by Justin Mohammed, the Commissioner for Aboriginal Children and Young People, after undertaking an Aboriginal-led development process. Other changes arising from the updated standards include requirements to increase the involvement of families and the broader communities in organisations' efforts to keep children and young people safe, and also to take some steps in managing the risk of child abuse in online environments. I will therefore move to our recommendation. So, as a result of the adoption of these new standards, the Child Safe policy is proposed to be updated to reflect Council's new obligations under the new Child Safe standards and to ensure we continue to meet best practice in this area. The report recommends that Council endorse the updated City of Whittlesea Child Safe policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms James, for that comprehensive overview. I just wonder if I could start off with a question, just to be pedantic. I note in the attachment, which is the revised draft policy, it's got a note in the footer that the date of adoption will be confirmed, to be confirmed, and I presume that's simply the logistics that after the council meeting, presuming adoption, that the date will actually be inserted on the policy.
That's correct. So if the policy is endorsed today, the 19th of September will be the date included on that policy. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, administrators? No? Well, I'm very happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.1.1. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Administrator Eddy. Thank you very much, Ms James, for all of the work that you do in relation to this really important issue. And I know that it's been a subject very dear to the heart of the Audit and Risk Committee as well. I think you've done a really great outline today, summarising the key changes, but also that important point about noting that it's also best practice. I just really wanted to say that from my perspective, the policy reaffirms Council's commitment to creating that child-safe and child-friendly environment for young people, whether they're in our direct care or within the broader municipality, and that we as administrators, equally as much as council officers and other members across the community, have got really clear obligations to protect children from harm, and we need to be constantly vigilant in relation to any changes to the Victorian Child Safe standards, and that they are then in turn reflected in our policy and practice. So I strongly support the revisions, and I found, apart from a few of the highlights that you made, particularly in relation to Aboriginal children, I thought that there's the new emphasis as well on managing risk in online environments, which are new and emerging issues that we've all got to face. So again, thank you for the work, and I strongly endorse the policy changes. Mr Eddy, would you like to speak to the item?
Just briefly, Chair, to support those comments you made, particularly around while we need to obviously meet our legislative obligations, this is also being seen as best practice in this space, which I think is terrific. And I note that we're one of 7 councils in an inter-council working group, and following the review of those other members, that they are now being used, or these documents are now being used as examples for the development of other councils' child-safe resources. I think that's tremendous, and our team is to be commended on that as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Davis.
Anything further, Ms Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. Just to reflect on one of the comments you made, Chair, about the online environment, I think that is the biggest risk to our children today. Not saying that the others aren't a high risk, but it's a really high risk because they live in social media and online. So they're the most vulnerable place for them to be. So it's great that it incorporates this online risk management now, because I think it's been left way too long.
Agreed.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
You might. Item 5.1.2, Every Age Counts, a campaign to end ageism. And again, if I could ask our Acting Director of Community Wellbeing to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So the Every Age Counts campaign is a national long-term advocacy initiative aimed at tackling the concept of ageism in Australian society. The campaign is part of a broader social movement which aims to shift social norms, so the unwritten rules and the common thinking and behaviours, with a view to positively influencing in the way that Australia thinks about ageing and older people. And I have Mandy Watt, Acting Manager Ageing Well, with me to talk more to that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Chair. Thank you, Chair. 71% of Australians feel that age discrimination is common, and we have another 43% of Australians over the age of 65 who have experienced discrimination because of their age. The Every Age Counts campaign is a national long-term campaign. It's led by a broad-based national coalition, and the campaign is supported by the MAV. There's been 11 Victorian councils that have already signed the Every Age Counts pledge. The local government is a key focus for the campaign because we are well-connected, trusted, and close to our ageing community. By participating in the Every Age Counts campaign, it's proposed that the City of Whittlesea promotes the campaign and the issues of ageism as part of the Victorian Senior Week Festival that's in October. A proposed pledge signing activity on October 7 will be a feature of the Seniors Week program, and other ongoing activities include a media campaign, undergoing an organisation-wide audit to ensure that our processes and programs are age-friendly, and training to build up the capability and capacity of our staff to ensure that all programs we run are age-friendly. So the recommendation is that Council 1 supports the Every Age Count campaign to end ageism, and this includes taking the Every Age Counts pledge on October 7, to join with the other community service organisations and councils to foster a society where every person is valued, connected and respected, regardless of age, raise awareness of the issues and impacts of ageism with staff and our local community, and to also to write to local, federal and state parliamentarians advising them of council support of the Every Age Counts campaign. And again, just to also note that Council's formal Every Age Counts campaign pledge signing will occur at the Victorian Seniors Week Festival in October this year.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Administrators, any questions in relation to this item? No, I have no questions either. So do I have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 5.1.2? And I can see Ms Duncan.
I'm keen to move this, Chair, and it's like we've bookended here. We've had children and now we've got the other end of the spectrum. Yes, happy to move that.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan, and I'm very happy to second this item. Ms Duncan, would you like to speak?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just briefly, I think this is a fantastic initiative that we're involved in, and I think myself and the Chair will be at the event on October the 7th, and I'm really proud that we're going to be doing the pledge there. And it's just great to start this conversation, because there is no doubt there is discrimination, and from our children through to our aged care, they're the next vulnerable or not next, but one of the biggest vulnerable groups in our community. So I think this is a great thing to do, and everybody in our community, regardless of who you are, should be valued and respected. So it makes me very proud that we are doing this. So well done.
Thank you, Ms Duncan, and I would absolutely echo those comments. I think this is a wonderful campaign. It's very dear to my heart, having been a personal carer for both my mother and father, and how many times that I would go along with either mum or dad to medical appointments or to surgery, and it was as if they had lost their voice. Everything was channelled through myself. So we've got to be very careful about the latent discrimination that occurs, and I was interested with your figure of 71% feel that there is age discrimination that is common. So, yeah, I will be there at our function on the 7th of October, very proudly supporting the campaign. Thank you. Mr Eddy, anything further?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, Chair. Thank you. I'd like to support all those comments and thank the team for bringing this forward. Again, an example of the City of Whittlesea leading the way, because from my count, there's 16 councils nationally that have supported this campaign. There's 537 councils in Australia, Madam Chair, so we're definitely at the pointy end of this one, and I'd like to see and hope that that number gets much higher. The other point I wanted to make is it's not that long that we were sitting out here in the Great Hall with Victoria's Commissioner for Senior Victorians, Gerard Mansour, talking about what councils can do to further the aims of positive ageing and ageing well. It's not a question, it's a comment that I hope we make Mr Mansour aware of our work in this space. Thank you.
A very important point. Thank you, Mr Eddy. On that note, I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you again. Item 5.2.1, Whittlesea Park Draft Master Plan, Community Engagement, and if I could invite the Acting Director of Infrastructure and Environment, Ms Amanda Dodd, to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really exciting project which will provide the City of Whittlesea, the Committee of Management and the Whittlesea community with vision, direction and prioritisation for future improvements to the Whittlesea Park over the next 5 to 10 years. I would like to acknowledge the role of the Whittlesea Showgrounds and Reserves Committee of Management in assisting council officers in the creation of this draft master plan. I'll hand over to Alexander Desmond, the Coordinator of Open Space Projects, to speak to the report.
The master plan of Whittlesea Park has been developed as a key direction of the Whittlesea Township strategy, which was endorsed in 2021. The site is a 25-hectare reserve located only 500 metres from the town centre and includes AF Walker, Whittlesea Lions Club Park, River Street Reserve and the passive recreation areas already known as Whittlesea Park. The site is located on Crown land, with the City of Whittlesea as the Committee of Management of AF Walker Reserve and the Whittlesea Showgrounds and Recreation Reserves Committee of Management as the managing committee of the remainder of the site. The City of Whittlesea and Showgrounds Committee have worked together in partnership to develop the draft master plan, which creates a vision for the reserve to guide short and long-term improvements. From this vision, 13 key recommendations have been developed, which include items such as the upgrade of the playgrounds, picnic areas, providing public toilet facilities, an accessible walking circuit path with nature walks, and opportunities for upgraded car parking. As part of this process, Council and the Showgrounds Committee have reviewed the land management and land maintenance agreements which are currently in place and have proposed a new model. With the support from Council, further consultation with the relevant stakeholders such as DELP and Melbourne Water will be undertaken. We are now seeking Council to support the recommendations of the draft master plan to be presented to the community for feedback. We are also seeking in-principle support of the proposed land management and maintenance model, with Council becoming the Committee of Management for the land west of Bruce's Creek Drain, the Whittlesea Showgrounds and Reserves Committee of Management remaining as the Management Committee of the passive open space areas east of Bruce's Creek Drain, and for the maintenance west of Scrubby Creek and Plenty River proposed to be undertaken by Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Desmond. Again, I might just kick off with an initial question, and I think you virtually answered it in when you were providing your summary, the officer report does refer to resolution of various land management and land maintenance issues on site and the development of a more contemporary model. And I presume the clarification is that we'll be having discussions with the Department of Environment, Land, Water, Planning and other stakeholders like Melbourne Water to resolve those issues. Is that correct?
Yes, the process from here, with the support of council, will be to continue to have those discussions.
Thank you. Any other questions, administrators? No? If not, I'm very happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.2.1, but with an adjusted part 2, which is coming up on the screen now. The intent of my adjustment or our adjustment to this is simply to really clarify what we're talking about regarding proposed land management and maintenance model. So it will now read support in principle the proposed land management and maintenance model for Whittlesea Park, with council becoming the committee of management for the land west of Bruce's Creek Drain, the Whittlesea Showgrounds and Reserves Committee of Management remaining as the managing committee of the passive open space east of Bruce's Creek Drain, and maintenance of the land west of Scrubby Creek / Plenty River continuing to be undertaken by council. Do I have a seconder with those amendments?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Thank you. Are you going to leave that on there? Yeah. I'm very happy to be supporting this particular item because I reflect on the fact that not long after I'd been appointed as an administrator, Ms Duncan and myself went out on site and we'd met with the Whittlesea Showgrounds and Recreation Reserves Committee, and we walked the reserve, and we could really understand some of the issues that you have really highlighted, particularly in respect of the fact that it's a large site, 25 hectares, and its proximity, which is only 500 metres from the Whittlesea town centre, and really just even about the appropriate access and utilisation. So I feel really quite proud that just within a very short period of time, having worked with the committee and with other key stakeholders, we've now got a draft master plan. And it's important to highlight, because I know that there are some members of the public in attendance this afternoon for this item, that this is now the further process, if this item is endorsed, to in fact go out on further public consultation. So I think it is an excellent master plan. I congratulate council officers for having worked in this way very cooperatively with key stakeholders and obviously with the committee to resolve some of the what are historic issues of land management, and in the attempt to resolve it going forward. So I really do congratulate council officers for all their efforts and really look forward to being part of the consultation activities and hearing the final outcomes of those consultation activities. So thank you. Ms Duncan, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Chair. Just to the Chair's point, having seen what we're talking about here, it is massive. And I think the impact that this upgrade will have to that area is going to be significant, not just for the Whittlesea Township, but also the tourists that come for the Royal Show and the things that they do in that township. And thank you to the Royal Ag Society for raising these issues when we did go out there, and for all the officers' hard work to get this done so quickly, because it wasn't that long ago, really, when we were there. So I too would like to go to some of the pop-ups that we'll have, and I note that the consultation will be open until Sunday the 30th of October, and that everyone can find that at engagewhittlesea.vic.gov.au to give their feedback. So I really hope we get a lot of feedback on what we're proposing to do there. But congratulations to all of the team who have worked on this. Well done.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. Mr Eddy? No. I will now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thanks again. Item 5.2.2, Proposed Planning Scheme Amendment, Request to seek authorisation, 149 McKimmy's Road, Bundoora. And if I could invite our Director of Planning and Development, Mr Justin O'Mara, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to introduce Linda Martin-Chu, our Coordinator of Strategic Land Use Planning, who will provide a brief overview of this report and office a recommendation. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Mr O'Mara. This report makes a recommendation that Council seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare a planning scheme amendment that rezones land at 149 McKimmy's Road, Bundoora. The amendment would rezone a former quarry site from its current industrial zone to facilitate the redevelopment of the site for residential use. The amendment would also apply the development plan overlay and amend the land subject to inundation overlay as it applies to the site. The application of a development plan overlay will guide the future development of the site by addressing issues including housing diversity, urban design, including greening, transport, open space provision, streetscapes and stormwater management. The land is located to the rear and on either side of the Dyson's bus depot in McKimmy's Road and is otherwise bounded by Darabin Creek to the west and south, Yarra Valley Waterland to the southwest and the future E6 motorway to the east. The property is otherwise surrounded to the north, east and west by residential development. Alternate uses for this former quarry site were first raised in the Council-adopted Thomastown Industrial Area Plan, which found the site would not sustain industrial use due to its isolation from the rest of the Thomastown industrial area and the availability of better located employment land in the municipality. Residential use of the site is considered suitable given the surrounding residential context and state government policy that seeks to facilitate the remediation of contaminated land, particularly on sites in developed areas of Melbourne with potential for residential development. The site has formerly been used as a landfill in accordance with Ministerial Direction 1 and the Environment Protection Act. An environmental audit is required to ensure the site is appropriately remediated and is suitable for residential use. This audit is well underway. It is both expected and recommended that the audit be completed and the Statement of Environmental Audit be issued before the final stage of the amendment process when Council makes a decision on adopting the amendment. It is intended that via this amendment, 5% social housing and 10% affordable housing will be facilitated in accordance with Council policy and the Whittlesea planning scheme. Should authorisation to prepare the amendment be granted by the Minister, the amendment will be required to undergo public exhibition. Due to the scale of the site and its proposed urban renewal, the number of affected landowners and the technical nature of the amendment, a tailored engagement and consultation approach will be needed. The Communications and Engagement team have been involved in developing a communications plan that goes beyond the statutory requirements for public exhibition. As such, I propose the officer recommendation as it is detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Administrators, do you have any questions relating to this item? Mr Eddy, I believe you do.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether we could hear a little bit more about that process of weighing up what would effectively be the loss of land for future employment use against, I guess, an opportunity to ensure we're contributing to housing through residential uses. There must be some challenges in making that judgment call, I imagine.
Mr O'Mara, I wonder in the first instance if you'd like to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that question, Administrator Eddy. As Linda mentioned, when Council did the review of the Thomastown industrial area back in 2018, this was one of the sites that was looked at, given its current zoning as industrial. Given the unique challenges and locational characteristics of this site, given it's surrounded by existing residential areas and it doesn't have it, it's not within the broader existing employment area, it is recommended that this go to a residential use for those reasons. It's very difficult to have, sensitive residential uses immediately adjacent to industrial zone land. They're often arises, conflicts regarding amenity type issues. So therefore, the officer recommendation is that it's more suited to a residential use.
Thank you, Mr O'Mara. Any further questions? Do I then have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 5.2.2?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. And a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Mr Eddy, would you like to speak?
Just briefly, thank you, Chair. So really this is the start of a process supporting this recommendation. As we've just heard, there is an opportunity here to turn this land into productive land and in particular the future provision of housing through residential use, noting that it is a former quarry that's been out of use for quite some time. Should the authorisation to prepare the amendment be given by the Minister for Planning, there will be public exhibition, I understand, including notification period to those affected landowners and agencies, so an opportunity there for people to have their say about that proposal, and then a development plan would be prepared with individual planning permit applications required. So we're just at the start of a very long process, but happy to support the officer's recommendations at this early stage.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. Ms Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to explicitly note that it's a critical issue in relation to site remediation and that any amendment would not proceed until a statement or certificate of environmental audit has been issued by an independent auditor appointed by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and that has been specifically built into the officer recommendations for this report.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5.3.1, Building Blocks Partnership Agreement Tranche 1. And again, if I could invite our Acting Director of Community Wellbeing, Ms Lanche Markowska, to open this item.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to introduce Amelia Ryan, Manager for Children and Families, to talk to this item.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Building Blocks Partnership, or BBP as it's known, is a long-term in-principle agreement between the Victorian Department of Education and Training and individual councils for co-investment of an agreed infrastructure pipeline to implement the Victorian Government's 3-year-old kindergarten reform. This report presents 2 capital projects that form the first tranche of a BBP agreement, and these 2 projects are being presented first due to timing requirements for the delivery of these facilities. The details of these projects are confidential due to requirements from DET, the Department of Education and Training, to seek approval from the Minister of Early Childhood and Pre-Prep prior to the public correspondence or announcement of these projects. Negotiations with DET are continuing to secure funding for additional infrastructure interventions required to meet unmet kindergarten demand, and once agreed, these capital projects will be brought to Council for consideration for a subsequent BBP negotiation. There is national and international evidence that 2 years of kindergarten delivered by qualified teachers delivers lifelong benefits to the child and the community, and the Victorian Government reforms introducing subsidised 3-year-old kindergarten commencing at 5 hours per week and phasing up to 15 hours per week, and the further expansion of 4-year-old kindergarten to 30 hours per week, which will become known as pre-prep, will see fantastic educational outcomes provided to children in the City of Whittlesea. These reforms require significant infrastructure investment, and the Building Blocks Partnership Agreement presents an opportunity for Council to partner with the Department of Education to facilitate an integrated approach to service delivery. I'm pleased to present this report tonight, and the recommendations for the report are that Council notes DET's in-principle commitment to provide enhanced kindergarten funding for these 2 projects, enters into an agreement for the first tranche of the BBP, and notes that negotiations are continuing for additional infrastructure projects and subsequent agreements will be brought before Council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ryan. Any questions, administrators? No, I have no questions either. So do I then have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 5.3.1?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Duncan.
Seconded.
Thank you, Administrator Eddy. Would the mover like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Mr Joyce, start the clock. I think this is a fantastic work that's been done here in planning for our current and our future generations that are going to need these services, and working so productively with the Department of Education and Training and the Victorian School Building Authority. I congratulate all officers and their teams for your exceptional work here. It's really important, I think, that given our population growth and the state government's 3-year-old reform program, that we're right on top of this and planning for the future, not waiting until we've got that need. We know we'll have the need, particularly with the government's reform program. So again, I think it's exceptional work, so well done to all of you.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. Mr Eddy?
Thank you, Chair. I will echo those comments from Administrator Duncan. We seem to be hearing a lot of building block partnership announcements around the sector at the moment. It's good to know that work is underway on developing a partnership agreement that would see the City of Whittlesea getting its fair share, and we understand the reasons why this first tranche needs to be presented in this way, but we do look forward to hearing more news in the not too distant future about hopefully more excitement ahead in this space. Thank you.
And I simply echo the comments of my colleagues, and we'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you again. Now we move on to item 5.4.1, Petition, Cigarette Butt Litter Education and Request for Cigarette Butt Bins. And I'm going to again introduce our Acting Director of Infrastructure and Environment, Ms Amanda Dodd. But before I ask her to speak to this item, can I just also welcome to the chamber the person who initiated the petition, Ms Tanya Sharma, who we're very proud of. Congratulations and thank you, Tanya. And also her mother, Dr Swati Sharma, who we've also had an opportunity to meet previously. So we're really glad to have you along this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. Ms Dodd.
Thank you. I'll speak to this report. The purpose of the report is to outline the response to the petition received from 237 residents requesting that Council have education programs regarding the dangers of cigarette butt litter and to install cigarette butt bins around parks, shopping centres and schools in our municipality. The petition was led by a grade 6 student who's here with us in the chamber from Lakeside College. The student organised the petition to help protect the environment and help raise awareness with her classroom friends and students regarding the dangers and damage of cigarette butts and what they cause to the environment. Council officers have worked with the lead petitioner by phone and email to identify locations which have been needing to be targeted for further investigation and action. The City of Whittlesea has recently employed a litter enforcement team, one of the actions within our Rethinking Waste plan. This team undertakes regular inspections across the municipality to identify and stop pollution impacting our community. This team works alongside the Environmental Protection Agency and place-based council officers to highlight litter hotspots and address these issues quickly. We would encourage, and I would encourage anyone in the municipality who has incidences of litter and reporting to raise it to us, like our lead petitioner has, so that team can get onto it quickly and we can address that damage. The litter enforcement team worked alongside the petitioners to identify some place-based recommendations as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Dodd. Administrators, any questions of Ms Dodd? Mr Eddy.
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. This is terrific to see this coming forward, and of course councils have an important role to play in this space, particularly in terms of education and awareness. My question, Ms Dodd, is a little bit left of centre of the cigarette butt issue. There's been a lot of media attention lately on councils and what they're doing or not doing to raise awareness, not only about smoking but also vaping, and the City of Melbourne has put up signs which has led to challenges to other councils around doing more to raise awareness in that space. I wonder if you could comment on what we're doing, and hopefully it's something that's well and truly on our radar.
I might hand that across to the CEO if possible. Thank you.
No worries, I'm happy to answer that. So we are undertaking a review of that at the moment. As you're aware, Administrator, we're about to review our local laws because to be able to take action on this is going to need a local law update. We will have a look at the City of Melbourne model and their signage, and there's a lot of work to do obviously with community education around vaping. We always partner with other health authorities, and I think Quit Victoria is a good one. So we'll have a look at what they're doing in that space and see if there's more that we can do to get the message out about the believed dangers of vaping.
Any further questions, administrators? If there's no further questions, I'd be delighted to move the officer recommendation for item 5.4.1. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments. Firstly, our sincere congratulations to Tanya Sharma, who is a student at Lakeside College, for her fantastic environmental awareness, and having spent some time with her mother, Dr Sharma, we have heard firsthand what an environmental crusader she is. Quite amazing, not just obviously with council, but influencing many other people, including her team, her students, colleagues at school and so forth. So well done on starting the petition, and obviously it's had very tangible benefit in relation to council's response. I just also wanted to note that we really recognise the important role that council plays in this area, prevention, education and so forth, and then remedial action as required. But importantly, it's got to be about a collective effort. And that means not just council, but also, as has happened in this case, community members working with council, local businesses, shopping centre management and so forth, and obviously our leaders of the future. So thank you again for your efforts that have resulted in very tangible response from council, and we look forward to further reports in relation to our work in trying to address the whole issue of cigarette butts. Thank you. Mr Eddy.
I'd simply like to say hear, hear, and nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. Ms Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Just to acknowledge Tanya for bringing this to our attention, which was actually tabled at the council meeting when we were at the Barry Road Community Centre. Oh. So what an exceptional young person she is, and I'm sure she will be a massive leader of the future. So thank you to her for putting in the effort and loving where she lives to try and make it better for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5.4.2, petition to remove trees on Eagle's Nest and part of Corella Drive, Whittlesea. And again, Ms Dodd, if I could ask you to introduce this item.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to outline the response to the petition received from 14 residents requesting council remove eucalyptus trees from Eagle's Nest and a section of Corella Drive in Whittlesea. I will hand over to Will Jones, our Senior Arborist Planning and Risk, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Chair. A petition was received on the 23rd of May from 14 residents requesting that council remove and replace the eucalyptus trees in Eagle's Nest and a section of Corella Drive in Whittlesea. The signatories raised concerns regarding the safety of footpaths due to mechanical lifting caused by tree roots, the perceived mess that these trees create and the required workload to maintain the presentation of the residents' properties, the safety of the trees in wind, and the perceived heightened bushfire risk that the residents feel these trees present. Council officers completed a footpath inspection of the area, and 9 issues identified in Eagle's Nest all fell within compliance measurements, while 6 issues falling outside of these tolerances were identified in Corella Drive. Tree maintenance records indicated instances of limb failure due to wind in some of the trees concerned. These trees were inspected post-limb fall by Council's contracted arborists and found not to have an increased risk of failure. An independent arboricultural report concluded that none of the trees concerned presented a heightened risk of failure, with none recommended for removal. Moderate and low priority pruning actions were identified by the consultant and will be carried out as part of the biennial zone work schedule. To address the concerns regarding bushfire risk raised by the signatories, an independent bushfire risk assessment was commissioned by Council. The report concluded the trees concerned did not pose a significant fire risk, recommending that the continuation of understory fuel management strategies already in place. As a result of these assessments, the following recommendations were made to Council. The Council resolved that an independent arboricultural report and bushfire risk assessment was completed on the nature strip trees located at Eagles Nest and Corella Drive, focusing on the appropriateness of the nature strip trees in line with the street tree management plan, subsequently concluding that there was no elevated risk of tree failure and no significant fire risk identified, and as a result, all trees will be retained. That an inspection of footpaths in Corella Drive and the Eagles Nest was completed and minor repair works in Corella Drive will be undertaken as part of Council's routine footpath maintenance program, and the Council officers advised the head petitioner that the trees will be retained and continue to be monitored and maintained as part of Council's biennial inspection program, and that the minor footpath repair works in Corella Drive will be undertaken as part of Council's routine footpath maintenance program.
Thank you very much, Mr Jones. Administrators, do you have any questions on this item? And nor do I have any questions. Do I then have a mover for the... Thank you, Mr Eddy. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. Mr Eddy.
Just briefly, Chair, not the first time we've had a request of this nature. They all are treated very seriously, and I note the extremely thorough and professional assessment that's been done of the issues raised in this petition and the officer's findings with regard to that. Also that the footpath issues will be dealt with, and that importantly there will be ongoing monitoring and maintenance conducted with regard to these trees. So on that basis, happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. Ms Duncan? No? I just want to also echo Mr Eddy's comments about the fact that we always seek external independent advice. So in this case, we got an independent arborist report. We also got the independent report in relation to fire risk. I think that's really important to give Council and the public comfort in relation to decision making. So on that note, I'll put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Item 5.5.1, Whittlesea 2040 Indicators Review. And if I could ask our Executive Manager, Governance and Strategy, Mr Frank Joyce, to introduce this item. Thank you, Mr Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. I'd firstly just like to introduce our Acting Unit Manager Corporate Planning and Improvement, Alessandra San Vicente, who will speak to the item.
Thank you.
The shared long-term council and community vision, Whittlesea 2040, A Place for All, was adopted in October 2018. It provides a clear picture of what council and community want to achieve, outlying along 4 goals: connected community, livable neighbourhoods, strong local economy and sustainable environment. The Community Plan 21 to 25 incorporates the vision and expands it to include a 5th enabling goal, high-performing organisation. The Community Plan further includes a comprehensive set of initiatives key initiatives that Council is delivering in response to the vision and evolving community needs. Progress is assessed towards these goals by a set of indicators referred to as Whittlesea 2040 indicators. These indicators help Council plan infrastructure, services and programs to meet the diverse needs of a growing community. Council periodically reports against these indicators in our annual reports to increase transparency and clarity. In the Community Plan 21 to 25, Council committed to reviewing and updating the Whittlesea 2040 indicators To ensure the Whittlesea 2040 indicators were aligned to the most recent community and organizational needs, and include the indicators for the high-performing organization goal, which was introduced in 2019. The review identified 22 indicators across 5 goals and 15 key directions of Council's strategic planning framework, compared to 17 indicators originally established. During the public consultation and engagement period, 18 responses were received. 15 responses were supportive of the proposed 2040 indicators, and 3 respondents qualified their view by commenting against waste diversion, Aboriginal gathering place, and support for residents experiencing financial stress. Following the community consultation and engagement between the 15th of July and 7th of August 2022, it is proposed that one indicator, workforce engagement, will be moved from the Whittlesea 2040 indicators to the high-performing organisation strategy, which is currently under development. And another indicator, total waste per capita, will be added to the sustainable environment strategy, also under development at the moment. It is proposed that Council notes the engagement outcomes and adopts the revised Whittlesea 2040 indicators to replace the indicators currently included in the Whittlesea 2040 vision and the Community Plan 21 to 25.
Thank you very much. Administrators, do you have any questions in relation to this item? No? No? Do I then have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 5.5.1?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. And a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. Ms Duncan.
Delighted to speak, Chair. So just to draw out, thank you for your report, draw out that from 17 to 21 indicators, that these now include measures around mental health, access to open space and carbon emissions. I think that's really important to draw that out, because it's that's critical for our community. So thank you for your report and all the work that's been done by all the officers, because it's been a mountain of work to go into this, and it's been a fantastic way to solidify what we're trying to do for the community. So congratulations to everybody that's had input on this plan and the key indicators as well. It's really great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. And Mr Eddy.
Very, very briefly, Chair, just to add to Administrator Duncan's comments, which I support, it's important to be able to measure where we're headed and take corrective action on the way if necessary. And of course, we report against these annually as well within our annual report. I'd just like to share a saying that a famous, it might not have been a philosopher, might have been a songwriter, actually said that if you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you again. Item 5.5.2, Governance Rules Review Post-Community Consultation. And again, Mr Joyce, if I could ask you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, before I introduce the Speaker to the item, I'll just note that this has been a significant amount of work to ensure that we can set the council meetings up and to involve public as much as we can. And there's some significant changes which Ms Boyle will go through in relation to how we can assist community to participate, and also how the council meetings can reflect the diversity of our community and a place for all, which is the council's vision. So I'll pass on to Samantha Boyle, who's the Unit Manager of Governance and Risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Joyce. Yes, as you said, this is a key document for council in helping us to document and discuss our decision-making processes to ensure that we have active participation from the community, as well as clear guidelines for council to operate within. It's also a key document that talks about how our council meetings are conducted, how our election processes for mayors and deputy mayors are undertaken, and how our decisions are made across council. We recently reviewed the governance rules to ensure that they are current and include provisions for virtual meetings, clearer language and definitions, embedding the acknowledgement of traditional owners, and replacing the traditional Lord's Prayer with a good governance diversity statement. We then took our proposal to the community for feedback. And during that time, we had our consultation period. We received feedback through some of our community representation groups, as well as through direct feedback from people going onto the the Council Engage website, which was great. As a result of that feedback process, we were able to make some further changes to the governance rules, and that included minor changes to our diversity statement to make it more open and realistic of our active participation, including word changes to the acknowledgement of the traditional owners, so that we also include the Tangarang people, as they are the traditional owners of a section of our northern mid part of our municipality, and further refinement of the voting process for Mayor and Deputy Mayor. One of the other changes that we made was an increase in the time allowed for public questions. We had a number of public questions tonight, and this gives the community more time, so it gives them 3 minutes to ask their questions. The proposed governance rules that we have included in the report tonight have been included for Council's decisions, and we recommend that Council adopt the updated governance rules, and as a result we will write to submitters to thank them for their contribution.
Thank you very much, Ms Boyle. I think that was a good summary of the revisions in the governance rules we're considering this afternoon. Administrators, do you have any questions in relation to this item? No? I'm very happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.5.2. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Administrator Eddy. As I indicated, Ms Boyle, I think you provided a really good summary of the key changes in relation to the governance rules that we're considering this afternoon, and I think you've highlighted that we needed to take account of the recent changes in the Local Government Act, best practice in good governance across the sector and beyond, and importantly the feedback that we've received from the community. But I think it's also important to note that we last adopted governance rules in June 2021, and we've been able to reflect on how have those governance rules been implemented, were they successful, did we need to adjust them. So I just also want to note that I really support the increased time for public question and submission, because that's critical to the public process of good governance. The fact that we're also embedding within the rules at least two council meetings at community venues, followed by a community council meeting. The new rules, I think, are plain English and user-friendly, so they're accessible and easy to follow, and demystify some of the governance processes. And then I just wanted to make a final comment that the changes that are included in the new governance rules have got nothing to do with being politically correct. They're simply all about effective governance and ensuring that council meetings are more inclusive and accessible and really reflective of our incredibly diverse community. So I really applaud the new governance rules and the changes that are embedded within them. Administrator Eddy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is, again, an improvement over the last set of rules, which were an improvement over what existed before then. So this iterative process, I think, improves them each time. I just wanted to note and thank those submitters. The 12 responses, I think, was more than I expected. It's a pretty dry subject, let's be honest. So it was great to receive that feedback, and I'm glad you addressed the issue about political correctness, because it's far from being about that. I'll also make the note that the governance rules include an election period policy, and while I'm sure this set of rules would take us through to the next election for councillors, we'll likely be looking at this again, but if not, very importantly, that election period policy is there and ready to go in 2 years' time as well. So I thank the officers for their work and the community for their input.
Thank you. Well said, Mr. Eddy. Ms Duncan?
No, thanks, Chair. I think you've covered it.
Thank you. I'll then put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion's carried. Thanks again. Item 5.5.3, walking and cycling plan. And again, Ms Dodd, if I could get you to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. We are very excited to be bringing forward this report to Council to seek adoption of the City of Whittlesea's walking and cycling plan. The plan was developed to guide improvements to walking and cycling conditions in the municipality, to raise awareness of the opportunities of walking and cycling, and to increase the level of walking and cycling participation. Walking and cycling as modes of transport have been identified as crucial to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and mitigating climate change. I'll hand over to Arishdeep, Manager of Urban Design and Transport, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Ms Dodd, and we note that we've already had a public question in relation to this particular plan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms Dodd. I'll pick up from the brief introduction which Ms Dodd has already presented. I'll just take straight into that, like with the key setting up what we walking and cycling plan will be doing, what we have developed it for, straight to the directions set up in the plan. There are 4 key directions which plan talks about: make active travel safer, encourage and promote active travel, build and maintain a high quality network, monitor active travel in the future. The draft of walking and cycling plan was exhibited to the community and over 130 submissions were received. Key themes that emerged from this engagement were expand council active travel network through the municipality, improve safety along our principal path networks, opportunities for shade, lighting, resting points, connect missing links, and making crossings at the busy roads safe. There was also, the community spoke a little bit about the key directions also. Those 4 key directions also took into the consideration the feedback from community. Walking and cycling plan addresses the key themes via a number of priority actions and projects that sit under those key directions. Similar to in the vein of the question that was asked earlier, one of the actions is about advocating and collaborating with our state government partners, especially around key arterial roads, to provide those connections for both pedestrians and cyclists. Council is keen to get more people out and about to walk and cycle, both for recreation and mode of transport. This will help in providing health and well-being, environmental and economic benefits for our community. Walking and cycling plan will enable City of Whittlesea to plan and deliver the active travel infrastructure aspirations of our community. I'm pleased to present the walking and cycling plan and put forward the recommendation as per the report.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Administrators, any questions on this report? No? No, and I've got none either. So do I have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 5.5.3?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. And do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Administrator Eddy. Ms Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Just to acknowledge that we did get 130 submissions on the draft plan and the feedback from the community, and to really thank those that took the time to do that, because it shows that this is a real need for the community, that they want safe and comfortable, accessible paths and trails. And I think that there's been so much consultation that we've landed in a really good place with the plan. And part of that City of Whittlesea's walking and cycling plan for 2022 to 2027, it will guide improvement and the actions that we need over the next 5 years to deliver that for the community, so that they feel safe, they can go and cycle or walk and use the trails or whatever they want to do, have a picnic, these sorts of things, any time of the day, all night, and feel comfortable in that environment. So well done on a great piece of work. I think this is really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. Mr Eddy?
Thank you, Chair. I agree completely with Administrator Duncan. It's an excellent piece of work. In fact, I feel like we need a fanfare because this has been a significant piece of work with 130 submissions. We've got a one-line recommendation to adopt the plan, and I feel like we've got to celebrate it more significantly somehow. There's some other things in this document around safety, lighting. We had a great coffee with Council today, Madam Chair. As you know, the issue of lighting on streets and roads came up. It's as important, if not more important, on our walking and cycling paths. So the plan addresses these themes through some of the priority actions and projects, and we hope it really helps to activate, promote and get more people active because of all the benefits that we've touched on today. So happy to support this.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion's carried. Thank you again. Item 5.5.4, 481 Cooper Street, Epping Draft Development Plan. And Mr O'Mara is coming back to the table to introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to introduce Strategic Planner Nick Robinson, who will provide a brief overview of the report and officer recommendation. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Justin. The purpose of this report is to consider the draft development plan for 481 Cooper Street, Epping, which proposes to develop the land for employment and industrial uses. The subject site is located in the Cooper Street Southwest Employment Precinct and is bordered by the Mary Creek to the west, the Hume Freeway to the east, the existing quarry and employment estate to the north, and the future employment land to the south. The site also contains 3 former quarry holes, Central Creek, and land earmarked to be incorporated into the Marambubba Mary Creek parklands, which comprise habitat for the threatened growling grass frog, along with other environmental values. Council officers have been working with the proponent and relevant government agencies in respect to the draft development plan since 2018. Over that time, the plan has been amended to address a range of issues, and including the growling grass frog habitat linkages, updates to the proposed road network, interface to Mary Creek, and retention of river redgums. However, a number of issues still remain. The applicant has subsequently lodged an application for review at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, and the hearing has been scheduled for October. As such, Council is required to resolve a position on the matter ahead of the hearing. For reasons outlined within the report, it is recommended that the development plan application is not supported at this time. And broadly speaking, we have the following concerns with the proposal. Firstly is compliance with the Development Plan Overlay Control Schedule 33, the proposed removal of native vegetation, land contamination issues, and the coherency of the set of documents as a development plan itself. Furthermore, it is recommended that the Chief Executive Officer appoint officers to represent Council at the hearing and also to notify the proponents, submitters and the Tribunal of Council's decision. Therefore, I propose the recommendation as they are detailed in the report. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr Robinson. Administrators, do you have any questions of Mr Robinson? No, I've got none either, but I am happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.5.4. And do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'm only going to make a very brief comment, which is really just to say that that was a comprehensive summary of the report that you provided, Mr Robinson, and of the officer recommendations, and clearly there's a lot of detail within the report itself and the recommendations. It's clear that the draft development plan hasn't resolved all of the outstanding matters, and I think that the grounds for refusal are very well articulated within the report and the officer recommendations. Thank you. Administrator Duncan.
No thanks, Chair.
I'm going to put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion's carried. Thank you. Item 5.5.5, Instrument of Appointment and Authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act. And Mr Joyce, if I could ask you again to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is quite a procedural matter. Under the Planning and Environment Act 1987, Council needs to appoint and authorise officers to undertake their work and implement Section 147(4) of the Act. What this authorisation and appointment does is enables council officers to effectively perform their duty, including enforcing and implementing the planning scheme, entering land and bringing a planning and environment matter to court if required. There have been 4 recent appointments, and so that is why we're bringing this back to council, so that those staff can be authorised and appointed as officers under the Act.
Thank you, Mr Joyce. Administrators, do you got any questions in relation to this procedural report? And I have none either. So do I have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 5.5.5?
Moved.
Mr Eddy. And a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. Would you like to speak, Mr Eddy?
Process matter as articulated by Mr Joyce. Happy to support it.
Ms Duncan? I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion's carried. Item 5.5.6, certification of 2021-22 financial statements and performance statement. And if I could introduce our Director of Customer and Corporate Services, Ms Sarah Renner.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to introduce Mr Aaron Gerard, our Acting Chief Financial Officer, to speak to this report.
Thank you.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. The purpose of the report is to present to Council the 2021-22 annual financial statements and performance statement for adoption in principle. The financial statements were prepared and audited by Council's audit service provider, RSD, on behalf of the Victorian Auditor-General's Office, and was presented and reviewed at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 1st of September. And with recommendation from that meeting, the Council to approve the financial statements in principle for signing. Subsequent to this meeting, Council were advised that the financial statements and performance statement have been cleared by the Victorian Auditor-General's Office and are now fine to be signed, with the Auditor-General's Office expecting to express an unqualified opinion on the financial statements and performance statement. I'll talk briefly to Council's financial performance for the year. Council recorded an accounting surplus from operations of $104.4 million, which I would like to highlight to Council. That is an accounting result and is calculated to comply with the requirements of Australian accounting standards, and importantly does not constitute excess cash available for Council to spend. This is due to the fact that Council's surplus is largely made up of either non-cash items, such as asset contributions from developers, or cash items that are restricted in how they can be used for, in future by Council. To highlight the significance of this to Council, non-monetary contributions received during the year were $76.9 million, monetary contributions from developers were $13.6 million, and non-recurrent capital grants received were $15.2 million, and when combined, exceeds Council's reported accounting surplus. For this reason, Council's underlying surplus is a much better indicator of operating financial performance for the year. Council's underlying surplus for the year, after excluding both monetary and non-monetary contributions, as discussed, as well as non-recurrent capital grants, amounted to a deficit of $1.3 million. Whilst recording an underlying deficit is not sustainable in the longer term, in the 21-22 financial year, the deficit was largely driven by the write-off of assets, which equated to about $17.7 million. This is a non-cash item and wouldn't be foreseen to occur on a regular basis in the future. Also, I'll touch on the fact that the report also highlights, or outlines I should say, the results of Council's financial sustainability indicators for the year. Now, these are measures that are reviewed by the Victorian Auditor-General's Office on an annual basis and are used to assess the financial sustainability of Council. Council recorded 4 low-risk items, 2 medium-risk items and 1 high-risk rated item for the year. The high-risk item related to the adjusted underlying surplus, which was due to some of the non-recurrent items of expenditure that I touched on before. I just want to highlight, it is budgeted in the 22-23 financial year that the adjusted underlying surplus will return back to a low-risk item, and there are no causes for concern surrounding Council's long-term financial sustainability. I propose the recommendations as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Gerard. That was a very comprehensive overview of the report. Any questions of Mr Gerard? No, I have no questions. So do I have a mover for the officer recommendation for item 5.5.6?
Moved.
Thank you, Mr Eddy, and I'm happy to second the item. Mr Eddy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Gerard has very neatly outlined the need and the importance of this report. I think the important bits that I heard were cleared by Vargo, unqualified opinion, and while we've got one red indicator at this point in relation to the adjusted underlying result, it's due to what sounds like a pretty one-off asset write-off process, which will return us to green hopefully sooner rather than later. That's what I heard anyway, Mr Gerard. So happy to support this, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr Eddy, and I just really wanted to also note that, as Mr Gerard outlined, the financial statements and performance statement were comprehensively reviewed by the Audit and Risk Committee, and Mr Eddy and myself are members of that particular committee, and by Council's external auditor at our meeting of the 1st of September 2022. So I'm also delighted, obviously, with the unqualified opinion. And we, of course, again need to acknowledge the really significant amount of work that Ms Renner, but also particularly Mr Gerard, have led in this whole process. So we're very appreciative of your efforts. Thank you. On that note, unless Ms Duncan... Oh, Ms Duncan, sorry.
I know I've shocked you there, Chair, but anyway. Just to Mr Gerard, just thank you for explaining that in plain English. I think that's really important, particularly when we're dealing with a big financial document like this one. So well done to you, and thank you for having it explained easily so that anyone who's watching or who'll look at this later can understand exactly what the message we're delivering here. Thank you.
Here. That was a good point. Thank you, Ms Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5.5.7, Audit and Risk Committee report on activity. And again, if I could ask our Executive Manager of Governance and Strategy to provide a brief overview of this report. Thank you, Mr Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. I'd firstly like to advise that Jeff Harry, who's the Independent Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, is an apology for tonight because he has another Audit and Risk Committee commitment. He's requested that I do present this report on his behalf. So the Audit and Risk Committee is an independent committee of council. It consists of 4 independent members and 2 administrators, and its purpose is to support and advise council in fulfilling its responsibilities related to external financial and performance reporting, maintenance of strong and effective governance and control frameworks, management of key risks, and council's compliance with legislation and regulation. The committee has a prime responsibility in overseeing and monitoring council's various audit processes, and under the Local Government Act, the committee is required to report to council twice a year. The previous report was provided to council in March 2022. So the committee has met on 5 occasions in the past year and included the following work. So consideration of the financial and performance reporting as per the previous report, monitoring external audit, including endorsement of the external audit plan for 21-22 and considering the audit of the annual financial report and annual performance statement, risk management, including briefings on council's risk appetite statement, policy and framework, business continuity management, cyber security, fraud and corruption control, monitoring internal audit, which is undertaken by CRO, and monitoring of of implementation of the recommendations through those audits, and considering the internal control environment, including reviews of relevant policies, systems and controls, and internal compliance reviews. The committee is satisfied that it's fully discharged its responsibilities as set out in the Charter, and the committee believes that Council has a strong control environment that continues to mature and has prudent financial management practices in place. So Jeff Harry and all the committee members would like to thank the administrators for their commitment and contributions to the work on the committee, and acknowledge the excellent work of Council's senior officers in supporting the work of the committee and their engagement in ensuring that the committee remains effective. So I put forward the recommendation as noted in the report that Council note the Audit and Risk Committee's report on activity.
Thank you very much, Mr Joyce. Administrators, do you have any questions in relation to this item? If you don't, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation for item 5.5.7. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mr Eddy. I'm only just going to make a very brief comment, because I think, Mr Joyce, you provided a really great summary of really the scope and role of the Audit and Risk Committee and what has particularly been on our agenda over the past months. It's, I think, really wonderful that Mr Harry and the independent members have recognised the work of administrators. As I indicated earlier, Administrator Eddy and myself are active members of the Audit and Risk Committee, and importantly of the work of council officers in supporting the various functions of the Audit and Risk Committee. But I just wanted to, in turn, particularly acknowledge the role that Mr Jeff Harry, in particular, as chair of the committee, our independent member, he makes an enormous contribution to the functioning and role of the Audit and Risk Committee, far beyond the requirements that are spelled out in the charter of the committee. So I'd really like to particularly acknowledge his role, his integrity and the amount of work that he contributes, and also the three other independent members. I think it's really quite an amazing Audit and Risk Committee with the breadth and scope of the different skills that the committee comprises. Again, if you could please ensure that those comments are passed on to the independent members of the committee. And I'm happy to have moved the item. Mr Eddy?
Not much more to add, Chair. I think you've covered it well. I agree we have an excellent chair, and I'm constantly impressed by the diligence and the value that is added to the Audit Committee by those independent members. I think we're very fortunate to have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Mr Joyce. I note that there are no notices of motion. Administrators, are there any items of urgent business? No items of urgent business. So if we could now move to reports of council representatives and the CEO update, and if I could ask initially Administrator Eddy if he would like to provide an update of his work over the past month.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. I know there's another event on tonight that people are keen to be ready for. You mentioned the Audit and Risk Committee. We had two meetings since we last had a council meeting, one to deal with those financial statements that we've received this evening. We've had some terrific site visits that I wanted to mention. The Mushroom Exchange, the Big Group Hug, and just last week, 5 Vineyards Mernda, 3 very different examples of some of the amazing businesses and corporate citizens that we have in the city of Whittlesea. Very impressive indeed. And just this past weekend, 300 more new citizens conferred at our Citizenship Ceremonies, and we also took the opportunity between ceremonies, you and I, Madam Chair, to visit Creed's Farm, which had an open day. And it was great to see the result of the effort that's gone in there over the last couple of years, and a tough couple of years for that organisation. But I'm very confident they'll bounce back very quickly now that they have their building back. And the examples we saw of the community spirit there on the weekend were terrific to see. So all of that plus coffee with council today. It's actually been a pretty busy few weeks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr Eddy. Any questions of Mr Eddy? I have none. No? So perhaps if I could just also briefly present a report, but noting that a number of the activities undertaken by Mr Eddy I also participated in, such as the Audit and Risk Committee meetings. I also had a board meeting of the Yarra Plenty Regional Library Corporation, and with the CEO attended the Northern Council's Alliance meeting. Mr Eddy mentioned citizenship. We've had the two on Saturday, so roughly 300 new citizens into the municipality, but we also had another citizenship ceremony in late August as well. We had a lovely community recognition dinner to honour the people that have been awarded their community awards earlier in the year, and also recognition of some of the recipients of the Australia Day Awards, Queen's Birthday Awards. Mr Eddy mentioned some of the site visits that we've undertaken, and I just wanted to make a note also about Coffee with Council, because it's important to note that I think the Coffee with Council's been very well received across the municipality. We've had really great participation, but also some suggestions that people would like to see some additional Coffee with Council sessions, particularly where there might be some residential villages across the municipality. And I think just even in the aged care area, we should be open to moving across the municipality, and we certainly have taken some of those ideas on board. And I'm happy to respond to any questions, but I see there are none. So I will invite my colleague, Administrator Duncan, to provide a report.
Thank you, Chair. I've done a few of the things you've done either with you or Administrator Eddy, but I did attend the Whittlesea Reconciliation Group meeting. The CEO and I attended the Interface Week event at Parliament House, which was very successful for us to be there and networking with that calibre of people, lots of ministers and the like. And I also just wanted to comment on the community recognition dinner that we did together, and it was just wonderful to be able to finally acknowledge in person those award recipients from our Australia Day Awards and Queen's Birthday, I think, around that time as well. So that was really well done. And with Coffee with Council, I'm absolutely up for going to some of the villages and the aged care homes to do that as well. I think that's really important. We try to do that. So that's it for me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Duncan. Any questions? No questions of Ms Duncan. Can I just note that our verbal reports will be documented in the minutes, and could I now invite our CEO to also provide an update?
Thank you, Chair. And I've got a few thank yous and a few updates today. So first of all, I'd just like to thank our acting CFO and his team for the amazing work they've done with those financial and performance statements. There's an awful lot of work that goes into that, and a lot of the information comes through at the last moment, backwards and forwards with Vago and others, so thank you and well done. A couple of the administrators have mentioned citizenship ceremonies. Just to confirm that we have at least another 9 ceremonies between now and the end of the calendar year, and as was mentioned, it's 150 people on average per ceremony, so we've got a lot of people to get through, and more are arriving all of the time from the Department of Immigration. The new purple-lidded bins for our glass recycling are continuing to be rolled out as part of the Victorian Government's requirement for the standardised 4-bin waste and recycling system. We're still on track for the collections to begin in October, and it's very important that people understand that that glass is actually being recycled and turned back into glass. We're getting a lot of questions on that. I think we're quite unique, the City of Whittlesea, that we've managed to achieve that. On Friday, I was honoured to attend the sod turning with the Mill Park MP and Minister for the Environment, Lily D'Ambrosio, on 2 projects. First one was a $1.35 million upgrade at the Kalinak Recreation Reserve. That's upgrading playgrounds with a flying fox, nature play trail, hardcore area with interchangeable netball, basketball rings, ping pong table and seating area. and a $1.17 million Red Leap Recreation Reserve redevelopment, including a new play space, nature play trail, basketball half-court and upgraded picnic shelter. And we thank the Victorian Government for their contribution to both of those projects. Works are continuing on Stage 1 upgrades of the Whittlesea Public Gardens in Lalor, which includes an impressive new playground, a new learn-to-ride area that's coming on well, and also at Lakes Boulevard, that's the area from Plenty Road to Findon Road in South Morang. We've planted over 250 new trees, which will transform the streetscape there into a beautiful boulevard of trees, and will also go a long way to contributing to our Greening Whittlesea goals of increasing the tree canopy. The Mill Park Library upgraded car park reopened on Monday the 12th of September, so 33 additional parking bays, including 2 new all abilities access spaces, new LED lighting, footpaths, landscaping, and this project was fully funded through the Federal Government's Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program, and obviously we thank the Federal Government for that funding. And just on all of those projects, I'd just like to thank all of the teams, particularly our capital delivery teams and others that are involved in the rollout of all of those. And thank you to Nick Mazzarella and his staff at the back there, undertaking all of that work in some pretty challenging conditions at the moment. And finally, I'd just like to mention, as mentioned right at the beginning of the meeting, the face-to-face exhibition that's on in the chamber here, the Ron Driscoll exhibition, be on display in the chamber for the next couple of months, and the easiest way to access that and to view these is to come along and witness a council meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Lloyd. That's a good plug to come along. We'd love to have you here in the chamber in person. Thank you for that. And I also note that your verbal report will also be documented in the minutes. Any questions of Mr Lloyd? No? There's no confidential business. And so that brings us to the end of the meeting, and therefore I declare the meeting closed at 5:55. Thank you.